Hello. Today we're going to take a look at the Snowflakes Embryo Adoption Program, which is an affordable and accessible adoption choice, especially if you're interested in bringing an infant into your home through adoption. The Snowflakes Embryo Adoption Program is a division of Nightlight Christian Adoptions. It was established 25 years ago, back in 1997. So we're going to take a little look at things about the Snowflakes program in particular, and then we're also going to discuss embryo donation. What's the difference to embryo donation, embryo adoption? Why do we think using an adoption model is better serves our clients and the children that are born to our clients? So welcome. My name is Kimberly Tyson. I'm the Vice President of the Snowflakes Embryo Adoption Program. I have been involved with embryo adoption and donation since 2007, so 15 years this year, doing marketing, writing grants, managing the program, learning more and more all the time about embryo adoption. It's very nuanced, but it is very simple and successful. What is embryo adoption, and is it a viable choice for me? And how do I go about selecting an organization to adopt my embryos from? The Snowflakes Embryo Adoption Program, as I mentioned, is a division of Nightlight Christian Adoptions. It was established back in 1997. It is the only licensed and accredited embryo adoption agency in the world. We were accredited last year by the Council on Accreditation. After a very rigorous process of looking at our organization, making sure we had appropriate processes in place, client services in place, all of these things. And at the end of 2021, we were accredited by COA, which it was very exciting to become the first embryo adoption agency to achieve accreditation. It's pretty exciting to be a licensed and an accredited adoption agency. In 2022, we expect to have over 950 babies born into their loving families through the Snowflakes Embryo Adoption Program. So it is a very successful adoption program and a very successful way for people to bring infants into their family. Sometimes people get a sense that, oh, that won't be for me. I've miscarried. I've already been through IVF. It failed. All kinds of reasons people think that embryo adoption probably won't work for them, and they think perhaps domestic infant adoption is a better path for them. But we want to talk about Snowflakes as a path to bringing that infant into your home today so that you can feel confident in the choice that you make for your family. Is embryo adoption the right adoption path for your family? Our success rate is very high for a transfer to pregnancy. It's 48 to 50%. And after you achieve that pregnancy, maintaining that pregnancy and giving birth to your adopted baby is up in the 90th percentile. So there's a very good opportunity for people to achieve pregnancy and childbirth through the Snowflakes program. First, I want to focus a little bit on the difference between embryo donation and a true embryo adoption program. There are many organizations out there that say they do embryo adoption, but they really don't truly follow the best practices of adoption. So we want to focus on that a little bit too. Fertility clinics, many fertility clinics throughout the country have internal, what they call embryo donation programs. You have to be a patient of the clinic in order to use their program. And the embryos that are being donated for that program are being donated by patients of that clinic. So the patients who are going to be using the donated embryos are getting embryos from patients who also use that clinic. So most likely these people are living in a geographic vicinity to one another if they're using the same adoption or donation clinic, fertility clinic. Oftentimes, there are long wait times for embryos at embryo donation clinic programs because they just are not getting as many embryos donated as they have patients waiting. Many times in a fertility clinic program, the set of embryos that is donated is divided amongst multiple patients. And so this may mean if they get a donation of 6 embryos, and they have 10 people waiting for embryos, maybe they'll take the first 3 families in line and give each family 2 of those 6 embryos. The problem is that most of these programs are anonymous in nature. So the person who donated the embryos doesn't know if anybody ever got pregnant with their embryos, doesn't know if any babies were born from those embryos. And if the embryos are divided amongst those multiple families, as I just mentioned, none of those families are going to know that genetic siblings are potentially being born into these other 2 families, and there are probably genetic siblings existing in the original donor family. So that's one of the strongest reasons that we advocate for an adoption model, because we're keeping track of the genetics and we are trying to tightly group the genetics and not divide embryos amongst multiple families if we can avoid that, which we do a very good job of that. So an embryo donation program is really truly focused on a medical procedure. So you're getting embryos that were donated from a clinic, you're having a frozen embryo transfer, maybe you're going to have a baby, which would be great, but you're not going to really know anything more than maybe some simple medical information about the people who donated the embryos. The Snowflakes Embryo Adoption Program versus a clinic donation program, we have embryos available now. Why do we have embryos available now? Because people with remaining embryos, one of the most difficult decisions they're going to make is what to do with their remaining embryos if they have indeed finished building their family. There are only 4 choices that are available to them. They can either keep them frozen and continue to pay storage on those embryos. They can thaw the embryos and discard them as medical waste. They can donate their embryos to science, or they can donate their embryos for reproduction. And obviously they can do that through a fertility clinic donor program if their clinic has an internal donor program, or they can donate them through one of multiple organizations, Snowflakes being one of them. People enjoy donating through the Snowflakes program because it brings them peace of mind, because we are doing a preliminary screening process of you before they're looking at your family profile and making a determination if they're going to gift you with their remaining embryos or not. So that gives them a lot of peace of mind. So there's a screening process that donors have to go through. There's a screening process that adopters have to go through the Snowflakes program. The adopting family will receive 3 generations of medical history, the health history, photographs, biography, and embryology reports will be sent to the fertility clinic where you're going to have your frozen embryo transfer performed. So you get a lot of information through the Snowflakes program, which is great and gives a lot of peace of mind to you as an adopting family. You are also going to get a lot of education about what the importance of open communication with your placing family is. And why do we advocate for that? We believe it's in the best interest of all the people involved, the placing family, the adopting family, and the children that have been born into those families. So a mutually agreeable communication plan is going to be made between the 2 families. So Nightlight and Snowflakes are not forcing any particular communications plan, but we are going to be advocating very strongly for a communications plan to be established. Both of the families' preferences are considered in a match. It isn't just a one-way street. And again, Snowflakes is not forcing any matches. These matches are mutually agreed upon from the donor, the placing family, and the adopting family before it is considered a successful match. And if the placing family has a reasonably sized set of embryos, which in our world is 12 embryos or fewer, then we place all of those embryos that the donor family has to give to the adopting family in one set. Now we're going to be evaluating whether the adopting family, let's say it's a set of 10 embryos. Well, if the adopting family is in their early 40s, we're not going to match them with a set of 10 embryos because there's no way they're going to be able to have enough frozen embryo transfers to give birth to 10 potentially different embryo children before they're probably too old to be achieving a pregnancy and carrying a pregnancy. So we're taking into consideration the needs of the adopting family, as we're also looking at the size of the set of embryos that we are going to place with them for adoption. So all these things are taken into consideration as we are matching families. This is kind of a high-level timeline of the Snowflakes process. You start with counseling from our team members. There's a lot of adoption paperwork that has to be finished, education that has to be completed. That's a part of the home study process. Everyone who comes through the Snowflakes program has to complete a home study. We do provide a service called a Snowflakes Family Evaluation, which is a reasonably priced home study service that we can provide to families in every one of the 50 states and indeed around the world. So you have to complete your family evaluation, or if you already have a home study completed, you'll have to enhance that valid home study with some embryo adoption education. After all of your paperwork and your home study is completed, you move into the matching process, where everyone is required to create what we call a family profile, which is like a little mini biography. And at a very high level, first, the placing family is shown an adopting family that we've been looking at family preferences for all kinds of elements. And we do this all hands-on. There isn't a computer that is matching people in the background. We have humans actually reading documentation, understanding preferences, looking at embryo sets, understanding financial situations. All of those things go into the matching process. After you're successfully matched, then you move into contracts. The contracts are based in property law because, unfortunately, in the United States, embryos are considered property and not people. So they're not governed by adoption law, they're governed by property law. But the contracts that you would be signing through the Snowflakes program are wrapped in adoption language, and there are some adoption language elements as a part of the contract. Once the contracts are finalized by both parties, then the embryos are ready to be shipped from wherever they're currently living. Could be the clinic where the placing family had them created, could be a cryobank. But the Snowflakes team is going to be arranging to ship those embryos from wherever they are now to the fertility clinic where you're going to have your frozen embryo transfer performed. You cannot schedule your frozen embryo transfer until your embryos have arrived at your clinic, because we want to make sure that the embryos are there and ready for the embryologist to thaw and for the reproductive endocrinologist to transfer. In the past, people are so anxious and excited about having a transfer, they were scheduling the transfer before the embryos were there. And then there was a mad rush to try and get the embryos there in time for the frozen embryo transfer. So now we just have it as a standard policy. You can't schedule your transfer until the embryos are actually physically at your clinic. After your transfer, we hope you get pregnant. There's a very good chance that you're going to, and then 9 months later, you're going to have your baby. This is such a great picture. I love this picture. These two families are matched families. The family on the left, my left anyway, is the Peterson family. The family on the right with the little Snuggie, that's the adopting mom and her husband. And they are a matched family. They actually both have 3 children in their families. The placing family had 1 child through IVF and then had remaining embryos and ended up getting pregnant naturally twice. And then they needed to figure out what to do with their remaining embryos. And they gifted them to Karina and her husband. And they also had 3 children. And they're really a very tight-knit family, a loving extended family with one another. So families place embryos through the Snowflakes program because they want to know about the couple who is receiving their embryos. Gives them peace of mind and confidence that if children are going to be born into that adopting family, that they're going to be well loved and they're going to grow up in an environment that maybe is very similar to their own home. So that's important to them. 93% of our matched families would like to have regular communication with one another. Now, that doesn't mean regular every day, like maybe you talk to your mother, but regular as in maybe once a year is all you agree upon at first, because you're developing a relationship. We don't expect families to be tight-knit right off the bat. When we make new relationships in life, it takes a little bit of time for those relationships to be developed. And we expect that same timeline for developing a relationship between matched families. And the thing that you really need to keep in mind is any children that you're giving birth to, they more than likely have genetic siblings already living in the placing family. So we really need to be cognizant of that. Sometimes that's a surprise to people. It's like, what? There are genetic siblings already? Well, of course there are, because the placing family had IVF and they had children from the set of embryos, and now they're gifting their embryos to you, and they're the genetic siblings of the children that are in that family. There's a lot of security in the placement of embryos through adoption, through embryo adoption. The embryos are legally transferred from the placing parents to the adopting parents by contract. As I mentioned, embryos are property, so it is a transfer of property. And so when the contracts are completed and the embryos are shipped, the embryos are now owned, if you will, by the adopting family. And then they are your responsibility. In the contract, the placing family is giving up all of their rights and responsibilities to those embryos. So when you have ownership of those embryos and you're scheduling your transfer and you have your baby, you don't have to be worried that the placing family is going to come and want your baby. I have never had that experience in the 15 years that I've been here at the Snowflakes program of any placing family meeting up with the adopting family, seeing the newly born baby and wanting it back. Is there a fear that may be the feeling that the adopting mother has, or the placing mother even has? Sure. But I have found that when these families get together, it just is naturally recognizable that this baby belongs in the adopting family. Remember, that mother has carried that baby for 9 months. She's bonded with that baby, as is her husband. And I think the placing families totally recognize that that's a new family unit. The contracts, as I mentioned, have to be completed before a frozen embryo transfer can be scheduled. And when you give birth to your baby, here's the beauty of embryo adoption. You don't leave the hospital wondering if the birth mother is going to want to keep the baby now that she's given birth to it. You are the birth mother. And you're going to leave the hospital with your name on the birth certificate and your husband's name on the birth certificate. And nobody is going to be changing their mind about the placement of that baby into your family. That baby is your baby, and that baby is a member of your family. And there are no court finalizations or relinquishment papers that have to be signed at the hospital. The adoption is complete when you've given birth to your baby. And the fact is, maybe you have more of your adopted embryos in frozen storage for a frozen embryo transfer that you're going to have maybe a couple years from now, because you want to try and have genetic siblings in your family. But again, there's a lot of security in the placement in an embryo adoption. So that's another really great aspect of embryo adoption. So your frozen embryo transfer, all of your contracts are signed, and then your embryos are shipped to your clinic where you're going to have your frozen embryo transfer performed. The full set of embryos is shipped, and that set of embryos will remain at your clinic until you've used all of them up in frozen embryo transfers, or you determine to move them to a cryobank, or you determine that, wow, on our first transfer, we had twins, and twins is good for us. We're in our late 30s, twins is good, and you still maybe have 2 embryos left. Well, by contract, you're going to be returning those embryos through the Snowflakes program, either to the placing family or yourselves, to be matched with a second adopting family, because we want to give each and every embryo an opportunity to be born. Isn't this baby just so cute? I believe her name is Charlotte. She's just adorable. Well, let's look at some comparative costs between embryo adoption, IVF, domestic adoption, international adoption, using donor eggs or sperm, these kinds of things. So a Snowflakes, the Snowflakes all-inclusive fee is $9,000. That includes all of your preparation for moving into matching. Doesn't include the cost of the home study. That's roughly $2,000 to complete a home study. But the $9,000 fee also includes all the human resources involved in completing a match for you. It also involves Nightlight, Snowflakes program, attracting the donor families into the program so that there are embryos available for you. And there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes as we're working with the placing parents to get them ready and pass FDA requirements to be able to donate their embryos to you. So we're doing that behind the scenes on your behalf, and the cost of that is included in this $9,000 fee. The other thing that's in the fee is all of the contracts. And so you don't have to hire an external attorney to do that unless you want an attorney to review the contracts. If you do, then that is an additional expense to you. It includes our coordination with fertility clinics, making sure that we have collected all of the embryology information on the embryos that are being placed, making sure that we have checked with the clinic where you're going to have your frozen embryo transfer performed, that they will accept this set of embryos into their clinic. So there's a lot of clinic communication that's going on. And then, of course, a lot of coordination between the two facilities to get the embryos shipped and the cost of shipment. All of that is included in the $9,000 fee. And we're doing all of that for you. And we have experience, my friends. We know what we're doing, and we will treat you with respect and kindness and help you to move through the program as quickly as we possibly can. In the United States, a single IVF cycle can run 15 to 25,000, and maybe they retrieve one egg, maybe they retrieve 30. Let's hope they don't retrieve 30 and fertilize all of them. That would be a nightmare for you. It usually can take 2 to 3 IVF cycles before you can achieve a pregnancy. With Snowflakes, you don't have to go through this multiple times. You do have to have multiple frozen embryo transfers, but you don't have to go through that painful IVF procedure multiple times, because you can adopt a larger set of embryos that you can then use for your own family building. If your doctor is suggesting to you, after multiple IVF failures, using your own gametes, your own egg, your husband's sperm, maybe he's going to recommend using a donor egg. There are egg banks all around the country. The cost of human eggs can be anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000, depending on how valuable a particular young woman's eggs are to that egg bank. So, and then in addition to buying the human eggs, you're going to have to pay for the the IVF cycle on the donor to have the eggs retrieved. So that can be a pretty expensive cost. Domestic infant adoption is anywhere from $35,000 to $45,000. In the United States, there are not very many infants that are being placed for adoption anymore. So the wait time in a domestic adoption can be longer than maybe you are thinking or expecting. So the quickest way to achieve that adoption of an infant into your family is truly through an embryo adoption program like Snowflakes. International adoption is, of course, one of the most expensive forms of adoption, but at Nightlight, we do all forms of adoption, including international, domestic, and foster and embryo, because we want to help children in all stages of their biological development. We want to help children around the world get placed in a secure and loving family. So these are just some examples of the cost of various processes that you might go through to bring a child into your family. So why would you do embryo adoption? Well, do you want to experience pregnancy and childbirth? Is that a desire of your heart? Um, are you considering IVF? Why make more embryos when there are embryos available? Embryos, again, for simple biology clarification, an embryo is when an egg and a sperm have come together, and now that forms a human embryo that has all of the DNA, all the chromosomes that it takes to make a unique and individual human being. And we believe that each of those embryos is precious and should be respected. And we want to really try and help every one of them be born that is placed for adoption through our program. If you have done IVF unsuccessfully, we have many families that have come through the Snowflakes program that have been in that situation. And now the doctor maybe is saying, hey, you should buy some eggs and we'll make some more embryos. If you're, initially we're doing IVF because you wanted to have a genetic child, genetically related to you and your husband, but now that's not going to be possible, or maybe you've discovered that there are some genetic flaws in you or your husband, and you really don't want to create children from your own gametes. Embryo adoption is an awesome choice, and there are embryos waiting to be adopted. So why create more embryos when there are embryos waiting? And if you're looking for a more economical adoption choice, or even more economical from a medical perspective, especially using IVF with donor eggs, then embryo adoption is a really economical and cost-effective choice. So the embryo adoption program at Snowflakes was established in '97 to help families with remaining embryos choose a family who's going to receive those embryos. And because of our 25 years of experience in embryo adoption, we've developed some minimal guidelines. These are the minimal guidelines. They're not all of the guidelines. So you want to make sure that you're talking with one of our inquiry specialists to find out if you qualify for the program. But at a very minimum level, couples have to be married for 2 years. The adopting mother has to be younger than the age of 45. The mother has to pass an initial medical screening that says that she is able to carry a pregnancy to term. It doesn't mean that you have carried a pregnancy to term. It just means that the doctor doesn't see any problem with you carrying to term. And truly single women are, we're open to them applying to the program as well. The program is open without discrimination to anybody who wants to come through the Snowflakes program. We're going to be educating everybody who comes through the program about how it works and what may be the best path for them, whether it's the Snowflakes program or another program that's out there. This is another one of our embryo adopting families. These are genetic siblings to one another, and a really loving and wonderful family. So embryo adoption uses the best practices of adoption to protect all of the parties involved, but especially the child. It allows you to experience pregnancy and childbirth, and it simply begins the infant adoption process or any adoption process 9 months earlier than what we would normally consider a regular adoption timeframe. And it is definitely affordable and accessible, especially through the Snowflakes program. We have embryos waiting, and we invite you to learn more about our program. Here are some of the contact information. So Snowflakes Embryo Adoption Program, we invite you to learn more about this program to find out if it is the right adoption path for you. You can visit our website, snowflakes.org. There's lots of information on there that you can learn more about our program, learn about the home study process. There's videos, there's family stories. The family stories are great. So I really encourage you to go onto the website and read some of the family stories. And there is our phone number. I invite you to call us today. Thanks.